Hey, Walker or Sonny, is everybody or all the commissioners on? I don't see Commissioner.
Everybody but Francis, and Sonny's getting Francis connected right now.
I don't see Jeff.
Oh, here he comes.
Looks like
There's Jeff.
Governor Carruthers is having some audio trouble, so he may need to raise his hand if he's or I guess call in if the microphone isn't working. Looks like Jeff's also taking the audio is taking some time to.
Yeah, I see that. He just needs to unmute now.
Yeah.
All right.
Hi, Jeff.
Can people hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Yep.
No, the host is not allowing people.
Do you want the agenda?
Just you.
I've got it on my.
Hey, Wendy, good morning.
My laptop, and it is there.
Oh, now we've lost Commissioner Bluestone and Governor Carruthers.
Don't worry, Walker, I made sure Commissioner Bluestone has the call-in information if his internet isn't allowing him to stream it.
Okay, well,
I'm trying to get Commissioner Williams online as well.
I'm sorry.
So it's going, Jeff,
What?
it's going from left to right, and then you go up, and it goes left to right.
Okay.
So that was Commissioner Williams. She should be joining presently, and Chair, I think we have a quorum.
All right. We lost Governor Carruthers, correct?
Did we
Correct.
lose him?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, we don't have a quorum.
But we have, looks like we got, I think that's Governor Carruthers calling.
It may actually, 575, yeah, that could be Governor Carruthers.
Yeah.
I've asked him to unmute.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
It's
We got-
Francis is here too.
Okay.
Thank
This
you.
is Gary.
Francis.
You need to send me the link to this meeting again. I can't get it to come up on my computer right now.
I'll send it right now, Governor Carruthers.
Yeah, it's on the agenda, but for some reason my computer's not picking it up. It won't let it open. Okay.
I'll send you the meeting ID and passcode as well.
Sonny, I just
Okay.
sent it to him.
Thanks.
Okay, great.
All right, can we go? Jeremy, Walker, we're good to go?
Yeah, we're good to go.
So long
All
as
right.
Governor Carruthers is still here, we're ready.
Yeah, he's here. I see his number. All right, we'll call the meeting to order, and the call of the roll is in order. Commissioner Baker. Commissioner Baker, are you here? There you go, unmute. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Now I can, yes.
Hello.
Okay, I'll take that as a present.
Yes. Although I can't.
Commissioner Bluestone, you're on. Jeff, you're good.
Here,
Uh,
here.
Commissioner Carruthers,
Here,
Commissioner Solomon. Commissioner Solomon,
It says I'm muted.
Jeff, you're not
You're
muted.
not muted.
you're not muted, Jeff.
Right. Present.
Commissioner Solomon,
Present.
Bill Lang is talking. I can't hear him.
Commissioner Villanueva,
Here.
Commissioner Williams.
Here.
All right, roll is called, everybody's present. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a motion and a second?
Move to
So
approve
moved.
the agenda.
Thank you. Moved and seconded.
Second.
Commissioner Baker? Commissioner Baker? Commissioner Bluestone?
Hello.
Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
can you hear me, Jeff?
He
Oh,
cannot,
this says they can hear me just fine.
can't hear you,
But speakers aren't working.
but we can hear him.
Okay.
Oh, I
well,
know what it is.
That's on his
Damn
end.
it. All right. Can people hear me now?
Been able
We could
to,
always hear you. You just
Can
couldn't
you hear
us.
us? Can you hear me,
Oh.
Jeff?
I'm sorry if I used any bad language.
Well, we did, but luckily you couldn't hear us. All right, so a motion to approve the agenda is before us. Commissioner Baker,
I vote in favor of approving the agenda.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes,
Commissioner Carruthers,
yes,
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva,
Approved.
Commissioner Williams,
muted. I've asked her to unmute there.
Commissioner Williams.
Approve.
Thank you. Chair votes yes, the agenda is approved. Motion and second to approve the minutes of our last meeting on December 4th of 2020.
So moved. Approve.
Thank
Aye.
you. Moved and seconded. Commissioner Baker,
Approve.
Commissioner Bluestone,
yes,
Mr. Carruthers,
yes,
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Villanueva,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. The minutes of the December 4th, 2020 meeting are approved. We'll now move to item number 4, advisory opinion, and 4 at SEC, 4 through 8 advisory opinions. I'll turn it over to the executive director, Jeremy.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is one of 5 advisory opinions before the commission today. We'll be presenting them separately. I won't present all 5, but I will present the first one. So in this advisory opinion, the request asked the commission to consider where a newly elected legislator owns a construction company. And before that legislator was elected to office, the state purchasing agent awarded 2 statewide price agreements to that construction company. Those statewide price agreements will expire within a year after the legislator assumes office. And under those facts, the commission was asked to opine whether state agencies may purchase goods and services from the construction company under the current statewide price agreement, and whether or not the state purchasing agent can enter another statewide price agreement with that construction company while the legislature holds legislative office. And the draft advisory opinion opines that in response to the first question, yes, the state agencies may purchase goods and services from that construction company under the current price agreement, but only if the legislator first discloses to the procuring state agency the legislator's ownership interest in the construction company. And this, in response to the second question, the draft opinion opines that, so yes, the legislator's construction company may enter another statewide purchasing agreement with the state purchasing agent. But again, only if the legislator discloses his ownership interest in the construction company to the state purchasing agent. So Chair, it's a relatively straightforward opinion under the procurement code, and I present it to the commission for issuance.
Thank you. I'll ask for a motion and in a second, and then we'll go through and ask for questions. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Baker, any questions?
Let me just ask in terms of an analogy. Senator Phil Griego got in trouble because he had a financial interest in the possible purchase of a state office building, if I remember the facts. And it was his failure to disclose that got him on the wrong end of the law. Is that a fair summary?
Chair, Commissioner Baker, I believe so, but I'm not privy to all the details of Senator Griego's criminal case.
Well, my point is that he did not disclose. He got in trouble. This says you can do it, but you have to disclose. And so I think this is the appropriate answer to the question. Just disclose. Let people know who you are, what you're doing, what your financial interest is, and you're going to stay out of trouble most of the time. So I think this is a well-drafted, well thought out advisory opinion.
Thank you. Commissioner Bluestone?
No questions. I think it's a good opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Carruthers? Is he trying to get back on, I guess? Commissioner Solomon?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Villanueva?
No question.
Commissioner Williams?
Good job. Thank you. No
Thank you. Chair votes yes. Is Commissioner Carruthers back on? Here he is. He's connecting to audio, hopefully.
Yeah, he's rejoined, but his computer's connecting to audio.
Yeah, I see that.
Looks like he's got his Aggie shirt on.
Well, there's the problem right there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the roll on it. Commissioner Baker?
Approve.
Commissioner Bluestone?
Yes.
Commissioner Carruthers, if you can hear me. would you
Yes.
use oh, there you go. So you approve the issuance of advisory opinion number 2021-01?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Solomon?
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva?
Approve.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. The advisory opinion is approved and shall issue. All right, next one is advisory opinion number 2021-02.
Thank you, Chair. So Becky, if you would like to present this opinion, if you want to pass, Walker could present.
Oh, I've asked her to unmute. Let's see.
Sorry about that. I wasn't able to unmute. I can go ahead and present if that's okay, Walker.
Go ahead, Becky.
So this is a request that came in from a sitting legislator regarding matters on how they handle votes and contracts. But the question is, they sit on a member of a nonprofit board. They sit as a member of the nonprofit board on behalf of that assists victims of sexual assault. And they had a question about, well, they had two questions really. One was, how should the nonprofit organization handle its applications for state funds? Because there are funds that are funneled, state funds that are funneled through various organizations to this nonprofit. And the second is, may the legislator vote on legislation that affects the nonprofit's work. So we went through it and looked at the Governmental Conduct Act, which is mainly the law that we enforce that applies. There is a constitutional provision that would apply, but it's not that anything that the commission enforces. So that would have to be looked at separately. But the bottom line is that the commissioner or the legislator can sit on the board. There's nothing preventing them, but they need to be very cautious on their votes, and they may need to disclose their, I apologize, they may need to disclose their relationship with the nonprofit prior to votes. And the nonprofit needs to make a determination with regard to contracts, whether or not the legislator voted on that. That wasn't very clear. I apologize. Do you have any questions?
Is there a motion and a second? Then I'll open it to questions.
Second,
Is there a motion?
Move to adopt.
Motion.
Okay, thanks. There's a motion and a second. Commissioner Baker, any questions?
No, sir.
Commissioner Bluestone?
Just one brief question. Thank you again for the opinion. I think it's also well done. My question deals with the issue of the disclosure of legislators on nonprofit boards. As I recall, under the Financial Disclosure Act, all they have to disclose in their financial statement is their membership on for-profit boards. And I remember we talked about this in the context of the proposed ethics code to ask state officials and employees also to disclose their membership on nonprofit boards. And I can't remember right now whether that was included in a recommendation for legislators or not. And I wonder if anybody could refresh my recollection on that, because I do think this issue of disclosure of nonprofit boards is still an important one for legislators to be cognizant of. Jeremy, do you recall that?
Chair and Commissioner Bluestone, I do. I recall this discussion mainly in the context of the Model Code of Ethics, as opposed to the current set of recommendations that the commission issued in its annual report for legislation this session.
Yeah, I still think it's a good idea for us to keep this in mind as a recommendation to the legislature. It's nothing that has to affect this opinion, which I think is well done, well crafted, comes to the right result. But I do think this issue of disclosure on nonprofit board memberships is an important one to keep in mind for our future recommendations to the legislature itself.
Is that it, Stuart?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Carruthers, any questions or comments? Commissioner Carruthers, can you unmute if you have any questions or comments?
Sorry,
That's okay. Or you just muted again.
no questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Solomon,
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Villanueva.
I do have a question. In fact, I have two questions. Under 1A DCA, the second paragraph, it says while a legislator is not prohibited from holding membership on the board of a nonprofit, the GCA sets out guidelines that a legislator should consider in assessing whether to recuse from votes that might impact the outcome. Now on page under, let me see, full paragraph on page 17. I don't know if our pages are paginated the same way. I don't know if you see that under B. I assume that's 1B. It begins with according to the request. Are we tracking?
Oh, I see where you are. Yes.
Okay. It says according to the request, the nonprofit on whose board the legislator sits holds some contracts with state and local governments, and it goes on to give the conditions under which they would be prohibited, I guess, from accepting the contract. So it says specifically here, I guess the second line, it says these contracts may be prohibited if they were entered into during the legislator's term of office and for 1 year after the end of that term. Does that include, does that also apply if the legislator recused himself from that vote, or do you know?
I believe if the legislator, I don't know, Walker, would you have a thought on that? I don't know the answer to that.
Commissioner Villanueva, I believe that regardless of the legislator's vote, if there's legislation that is authorizing a contract with this nonprofit, and the legislator, by dint of their membership on the board of the nonprofit, has an indirect interest in that contract, and the legislation in question was passed during the legislator's term and for 1 year, during the legislator's term, then yes, the contract would be prohibited. But this opinion speaks to a constitutional provision that we don't have the power to enforce, and as you say, it really turns on the facts of the request. The request doesn't say what legislation authorized the contracts that the nonprofit has with the state.
Chair and Commissioner Villanueva, just to put a point on that, the answer to your question is yes. The constitutional amendment, its application isn't conditioned by recusal or not. If these conditions are met, then the constitutional amendment would prohibit the contract. The constitutional provision would prohibit the contract.
Okay, thank you very much. My second question is this: is that I'm looking again at the questions that were presented, and it seems like there are two. And under the answer, and this is on the first page of this opinion, it appears to me that second question was not answered. I think perhaps it was answered in the legal logic that was provided further on into the opinion, but it doesn't actually state an answer. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we typically would write something definitive like maybe or depends, or there's not enough information to answer that question. What specifically is additionally, the request asks whether a legislator may vote on legislation on sexual assault laws and appropriations for programs helping victims of sexual assault. I think that was the second question. It doesn't appear to be answered.
Chair and Commissioner Villanueva, I guess what I would say is that I think the answer isn't totally clear on this, but I would say that the first part, which says that the Governmental Conduct Act does not prohibit a legislator from sitting on the board of a nonprofit organization that receives state contracts or grants, is our best statement on what the law either does or does not prohibit. And as you, I think, flagged later on in the opinion, there's the answer to the question of what should the legislator do with respect to legislation that might affect the nonprofit. It's going to turn on additional facts. And really the only thing that we can point to are the principles set out in Section 3 about not using the powers of office to give a personal benefit, to gain a personal benefit. And so I mean, at this point, I think if the concern is that the answer needs to be clarified and made sharper, I appreciate that concern, and I guess the vote would then need to be to have the commission staff revise the opinion and issue it at the next meeting. But I think that the answer I think does fairly address that question to the extent possible.
Chair and Commissioner Villanueva, I'd point you to the penultimate paragraph on page 18, where the answer is provided.
Director, does the conclusion serve as the answer? I guess that needs to be made clear to me. Does the conclusion serve as the answer?
Well, Chair and Commissioner Villanueva, the whole of the analysis and the conclusion is the answer. The answer section that we provide is kind of the summary. And of course, the summary isn't going to contain all the detail that the opinion and the conclusion might. But with respect to your question, does the opinion answer the question whether the legislator may vote? That's expressly addressed in the opinion on the paragraph right before the conclusion. But Chair and Commissioner Villanueva, to I think maybe address your concern that I think that the opinion could be issued simply with also copying that penultimate paragraph into the summary.
I think that would be satisfactory to me.
Thank you. Anything else, Commissioner Villanueva?
Nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams?
Yes, I have a question on page 17, which talks about even though the legislature is not paid for serving on the board of a nonprofit, the membership alone is likely sufficient to confer an indirect interest in contracts. And I guess I was a little perplexed because it does go on to say, in a thorough opinion on this issue, which the Commission finds persuasive, and the Attorney General's office found that it could constitute a prohibited indirect interest in a government contract by actively participating in the affairs of the organization. And to me, I thought, well, it sounded like maybe they shouldn't be serving on one of these boards, even though they're not paid, because there could be a conflict of interest. So just to clarify that for me, and the way I'm reading it, are they saying that a person who is a legislator really shouldn't serve on a board like this because they have an indirect interest in the government contract? And it could conflict with the legislator's duty to exercise the powers of the legislative office only in the furtherance of the public trust. I'd like just a little clarification because that's what I read and I was a little confused about that.
Chair and Commissioner Williams, certainly a legislator may feel that service on the board of a nonprofit that holds state contracts is a potential conflict of interest that would counsel in favor of them not serving on that board if they were elected to the legislator. But as the opinion explains, nothing in the law prohibits them from continuing that service. And the paragraph you highlighted, I think, makes clear that at least under the constitutional provision discussed, the legislator needs to be careful about his or her legal duties and potential exposure if the legislator is voting on legislation that is going to directly financially benefit the nonprofit, even if they are not paid members. So certainly there's a potential of conflict of interest here, but it's covered at least in part by the constitutional provision, and the legislature, as we all know, they don't receive salaries; they just receive per diem and mileage, and so there are conflicts of interest that are quite common for legislators. It's not just limited to the nonprofit field, and the Governmental Conduct Act and this constitutional provision is, I think, meant to be some effort towards addressing those conflicts of interest.
Anything else, Commissioner Williams?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So if I heard correctly, there was a suggestion by the executive director to move the second to the last paragraph on page 18 to make it the second paragraph on page 14 under the answer suggestion. Is that right, Jeremy?
Yes, sir.
All right. And will the movement and the seconder accept that amendment?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So the motion as amended and seconded to adopt the advisory opinion number 2021-02. Commissioner Baker,
Approve.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes.
Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva,
Yes,
Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. All right, thank you. And we'll move on to advisory opinion number 2021-03. I believe that's yours, Walker.
Thank you, Chair. So this opinion started off as an informal advisory opinion, which we quickly provided before the deadline for application to these grants. But the general question is whether a business that is either currently or formerly owned by a legislator, the legislator has a substantial interest in that business. May that business apply for a grant under the recently passed legislation that gives grants to businesses that have been affected by the pandemic? And the answer to that question is yes, largely because the grants are not contracts with the state, and so they're not subject to the Governmental Conduct Act's restrictions on contracts between state agencies and businesses that are substantially owned by a legislator.
Is there a motion in a second to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thanks. Any questions, comments, Commissioner Baker?
I've got a question on page 22. The sentence just before number 2 procurement code. It says, accordingly, the application for the CARES relief grant and other related matters should be accomplished by someone other than the legislator who has the interest. What happens if it's a business with simply one owner? The legislator is the owner. There is nobody else who has a financial interest in the business. Is it okay for the legislator to nevertheless apply for the CARES Act?
That's an interesting question, Commissioner Baker, and I don't think I can't rightly give you the answer to that question, because under Section 9B of the Governmental Conduct Act, a legislator is prohibited from representing a person in the person's dealings with a state agency for pay, and a sole proprietorship type situation where a legislator is representing a 100% owned business in front of a state agency. I could see the argument that would be prohibited under 9B, but I think under the facts in this request, that situation is not implicated because the legislator has transferred away the interest.
And that goes back to my original, not my earlier comment about disclosure. I think if we keep emphasizing disclose, 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 a lot of these problems will not rise to the surface. There are a lot of close questions, and my view is that disclosure will help the involved people avoid getting into any kind of trouble or being second guessed. But that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bluestone?
No questions.
Thank
Good
you.
opinion.
Commissioner Carruthers?
No questions. I like this, the response.
Thank you. Commissioner Solomon?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Villanueva?
No questions, but I'd like to say that I do appreciate the thought that went behind moving this from an informal advisory opinion to a formal advisory opinion.
Thank you.
No other questions.
Commissioner Williams?
I just am trying to understand one thing. It says on page 22 that accordingly, the application for the CARES relief grant and other related matters should be accomplished by someone other than the legislature who has an interest. So is that a rule? Can the legislator apply, or does someone who has an interest in the business apply?
Chair and Commissioner Williams, my understanding is that the valence of this sentence about requiring an application for a grant to be made by someone other than the legislator is because a legislator who holds whether they hold an interest or not, or whether they're just maybe they might just be on salary with this business. The point of Section 9B is that a legislator can't, unless they're doing it in a professional capacity as a lawyer, for example, cannot represent a person for pay in front of another state agency. And the opinion says that an application for a grant is a matter before another state agency, and therefore the legislator should have another employee of the business submit the application and field inquiries that make
There
it
you
to
go.
the state agency.
Okay, thank you so much.
There's the
Thank you.
agenda.
Can you make it bigger?
I want to echo the sentiments of a couple of other commissioners. I think this was well done. I like the quickness with which you responded with
That's as
the
big as it
informal, but
gets.
to
I'm
make this
sorry.
a
It's
formal,
really a small.
Commissioner Baker, we had to mute you here. I'm sorry.
a formal opinion. Thank you. And with that, there's a motion and a second, and I'm asking for approval. Commissioner Baker,
Approve.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Thank you very much, Walker. All right, Jeremy, advisory opinion number 7.
Thanks, Chair. This is advisory opinion 2021-04.
I'm sorry, 04, yeah.
In this opinion, the commission received a request to opine on 3 questions. The first is whether it violates the Governmental Conduct Act for the state auditor to make public statements that threaten to apply pressure on the Martin Luther King Jr. Commission. Second, does it violate the Governmental Conduct Act for a sitting senator to make public statements about lawsuits that the senator, in their capacity as a private attorney, filed on behalf of clients against the Martin Luther King Jr. Commission? And third, does it violate the Governmental Conduct Act for a senator and the state treasurer, who is also a member of the Martin Luther King Jr. Commission, to send a total of 9 separate requests under the Inspection of Public Records Act to the Martin Luther King Jr. Commission sole employee? The opinion that's presented before you, Chair and Commissioners, is that under the facts of the request, those facts don't establish a Governmental Conduct Act violation on any of these questions. But the request also asked the commission to consider a proposed course of action for the Martin Luther King Jr. Commission. And this advisory opinion also considers the perspective advantage of the the requester, who perceives that the treatment from the elected officials that I just mentioned is disproportionate and unfair. And the advisory opinion considers that perspective, and I think kind of substantiates the reasons for why the request perceives the oversight conduct in that way. And the advisory opinion concludes with possible recommendations that might be of some assistance to the Martin Luther King Jr. Commission. And so with that, Chair and Commissioners, I present the opinion to you for consideration and issuance.
Thank you. Commissioner Baker, any questions? I'm sorry, I'll entertain a motion in a second and then go to discussion.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Commissioner Baker,
No questions.
Commissioner Bluestone.
I want to say that I thought this opinion was both legally correct and quite sensitively written to address an awkward situation that prompted the request in the first place. And I think that Jeremy or whomever all wrote it really did an excellent job at laying out additional options. And it's the kind of work that I am proud to be a part of on this commission. I think this really shows the extra step and consideration that was given to be sensitive to ethical concerns and to provide guidance where appropriate. And I think this was very, very well done. So I'm happy to support it and vote for it.
Thank you, Stuart. Governor Carruthers,
No questions.
Commissioner Solomon,
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Villanueva,
No questions.
Commissioner Williams.
I have to recuse myself here.
Okay.
I am a member of the NAACP, and I was asked questions about this issue, and I advised them to refer it to the Ethics Commission. So I recuse myself.
Thank you. So with that, Commissioner Baker, yea or nay?
I vote to approve the opinion.
Thank you. Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes?
Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva.
Yes.
Commissioner Williams is noted as recusing, and the chair votes yes. Thank you. And to echo Stuart's sentiments, this is a very thoughtful and well-written opinion that it's easy to get behind. Thank you very much. Okay, and the final advisory opinion, Walker, would be 05, which is item number 8 on the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. So advisory opinion 2021-05 answers the following question. May a member of the legislature who is also a candidate for United States Representatives contributions or their campaign for federal office during a legislative session? And the answer is yes. And that the reason that the answer is yes is that the Campaign Reporting Act does not apply to campaigns for federal office, and therefore the Campaign Reporting Act's provision barring legislators from soliciting campaign contributions during the legislative session is not applicable. So I stand for any questions or comments.
All right. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
So moved.
Rather than go through it all, does anybody have, any of the commissioners have any questions or comments? Okay, then I'll call the vote. Commissioner Baker,
Approve.
Mr. Bluestone,
Yes?
Mr. Carruthers,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva. Judy,
Yes.
thank you. Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. Thank you, Walker. I think probably even I could have researched that one, but Not to denigrate your skills, but to prop up my own bonus there. Okay. Thank you, folks, very much. I'll now entertain a motion in a second to go into executive session pursuant to NMSA 1015-1H3 and 1015-1H7. Is there
So
a second
moved.
motion? Second? Somewhere?
Second,
Thank you.
Second.
All right. So Walker or Sunny, go ahead and do your magic and let us know when we can proceed.
Chair, you got to vote on the motion.
Oh yeah, right. I got ahead of myself. Thank you. Commissioner Baker,
I'm sorry, I got distracted.
are you okay with moving? The motion is to go into executive session.
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva,
yes.
Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Okay, now may we go into executive session, Jeremy?
I'm opening up the rooms now.
Please.
Go. For the members of the public who are just joining us, the closed session of the commission has ended. We're taking a 5-minute break before resuming the open meeting. Chair, you're muted.
Okay,
I'm asking folks to unmute who are
Yeah.
not.
if you will all unmute, please.
Commissioner Solomon is here.
Yeah, Commissioner Solomon, if you could unmute.
Right.
And although he stays on mute quite a bit, he pays very careful attention, I've noticed. And then Stuart, you're muted as well.
I've asked Stuart to unmute.
Jeremy,
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question before we start again, but I had, based on this packet that I got, and you gave us some weekly updates from January 28th, et cetera, will we be going over any of those? Because I have some questions on that material that was sent.
No,
So,
ma'am. Best thing is for you to call me after the meeting. Those items aren't on the agenda, and those weekly updates are also discuss confidential information.
okay, thank you.
We seem to have lost Commissioner Bluestone.
We're always losing Commissioner Bluestone.
Sonny,
Okay,
I'm sure you're
He's
in.
coming back in now.
Okay. There he is. Okay. We are now back in open session and looking at item number 11 on the agenda, actions on administrative complaints. Jeremy, you want to lead us to the extent it's not just formality?
I'd be happy to. So Chair and Commissioners, in administrative complaint number 2020-31, the staff requests a 90-day extension for the general counsel to continue his investigation.
All right. Is there a motion, a second?
So moved.
Second,
Thank you. Commissioner Baker,
Approve.
Commissioner Bluestone,
yes.
Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes.
Commissioner, excuse me, Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva,
Approved.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes,
and chair votes yes, so approved. Jeremy,
Okay, thank you, Chair. Chair and Commissioners, in administrative complaint number 2020-31, the staff requests a motion to authorize the commission's attorneys to file a petition for a subpoena with the commission's appointed district court judge.
is there a motion, a second?
second,
Moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes,
Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams.
yes,
Chair votes yes, motion carries, subpoenas may be sought. Go ahead, next.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Chair and Commissioners, in administrative case number 2020-34, which is consolidated with case number 2020-35, the staff seeks a motion for the commission to extend for 90 days the general counsel's investigation.
A motion, a second. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay,
Second.
second,
Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
yes.
Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva. Judy? Judy, there's a delay. If
Yes.
you could raise, there you go, thanks. Commissioner Williams
yes,
and chair votes yes. Thank you, motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Next, in administrative complaint number 2020-34, consolidated with complaint number 2020-35, the staff seeks a motion for the commission to authorize its attorneys to petition for subpoena with the commission's district court judge.
Thank you. It's same case, but previous motion was on the extension. This is on the issuance of subpoenas. Is there a motion, a second?
So moved.
Thank
Second.
you. Moved and seconded. Mr. Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Bluestone,
Yes.
Commissioner Carruthers,
yes,
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
yes,
and chair votes yes. Subpoenas let them issue. Thank you.
Okay, next, Chair and Commissioners, in administrative case number 2020-39, the staff seeks a motion to dismiss the complaint for lack of jurisdiction.
All right, is there a motion, a second?
Make that motion.
second,
So
Thank
moved.
you. Thank you. Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Commissioner Carruthers,
yes,
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
yes,
Commissioner Chair votes yes. Motion carries.
Okay, last, Chair and Commissioners, in administrative case number 2021-01, the staff seeks a motion that the commission dismiss this complaint for lack of jurisdiction.
The motion, a second?
so move,
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Commissioner Carruthers,
yes,
Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
Commissioner Villanueva,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
yes.
chair votes yes. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next is item number 12, consideration of endorsement of lobbyist disclosure bill. Commissioner Bluestone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are actually two bills that we have been asked to endorse. And the first one is a follow-up to the concept we voted on and approved at our last meeting to say that if legislation was introduced to require lobbyists to file disclosure reports of the bills on which they were working, that we would endorse that. And we unanimously approved endorsing that proposal. I had mentioned a concept of, instead of doing a report after the session already ended, as had been proposed before, to have two reports during the session, one after the first week so that all the pre-filed bills could be disclosed, and then a second one a week after the bill introduction deadline so that almost all of the other bills would be, if not all of the other bills would be disclosed. And a bill was introduced to follow up on that concept by Senator Jeff Steinborn. And he has asked for the commission's endorsement. And I think his bill actually improves upon what I had suggested last time, because instead of specifying two specific reports at specific times, his bill requests that the reports be filed at one or more times during the session in a way that would be determined by the Secretary of State after she would conduct a rulemaking, get comments from all the lobbyists and everybody else who might be affected by it, and see what seems to be the most workable way to do it. And I think that's a better way of going forward. Just do a rulemaking, see what is commented on, and then have the Secretary of State adopt a rule. So I guess what we're asked to do right now with this first bill is, it's Senate Bill 314 that has been distributed in our packets, is to vote to approve endorsement of that bill. And Senator Steinborn has also asked that our executive director, Jeremy, be an expert witness to testify in support of the bill as it goes through the legislative process to affirm the commission's interest in having lobbyists make some kind of fair disclosure of the bills on which they are working. And I think it's probably better if we take each bill at a time. And so I would move that we approve and endorse Senate Bill 314 and allow Jeremy to testify as an expert witness on behalf of the bill to urge disclosure by lobbyists as determined by the Secretary of State in a rulemaking one or more times of the bills of which lobbyists are working on.
Is there I take that as a motion, Stuart. I think that word was in there somewhere.
Yes, sir.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Discussion. Further discussion. Commissioner Baker?
The only question I have is whether anybody's expressed any opposition.
As I understand it, there's considerable opposition, but Jeremy, you're probably closer to the action than any of us. What's your?
Chair and Commissioner Baker, just to clarify the question, do you mean just opposition among folks that would be regulated by this bill? Should it become a law?
Opposition by anybody. I mean,
Sure. Okay.
Good
Chair,
government.
Commissioner Baker, yes, there is substantial opposition to this bill.
Why?
Basically, what seems to be their opposition, other than we're trying to add to the responsibility of reporting by lobbyists, they don't want to disclose what?
So Chair and Commissioners Baker and Carruthers, I think the opposition just stems from the burdensomeness of disclosure. I mean, some lobbyists have upwards of 70, maybe 100 bills that they lobby on. And I think that's the source, from my understanding of opposition, just the burdensomeness that relates to disclosure. There might be other bases for opposition related to confidentiality concerns, but I really can't speak to that. The concerns I've heard just relate to the burdensomeness of tracking the bills.
I think it's traditionally been difficult to pass what would be called anti-lobbyist bills.
Right.
In the legislature. What is the temperature on the part of legislators, or are you aware of any conversations with legislators other than Steinborn on this bill?
Chair and Commissioner Carruthers, I'm not privy to those conversations. I've heard secondhand that the likelihood of this bill passing is very low.
Can I just interrupt briefly? I'm receiving some at least one member of the audience would like to comment on this item, and I leave it to the chair and the commissioners as to whether they want to open up these items for comment or reserve everything for the end. But
My preference is to wait for the public comment period, but I will gladly entertain one of my fellow commissioners telling me why that's a bad idea.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if we've already taken action, then the comment period doesn't help them very much. If they're going to obviously oppose this or want to support this bill, we probably ought to hear it before we take any action on it.
enough. Fair enough. Go ahead, Walker, and tell us who we're talking to, and please keep your comments pointed.
all right, thank you. It's Ricky Lee Chavez. I have asked her to unmute herself and start her video.
Thank you. Ms. Chavez?
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Commission. Thank you so much for your time today. I will be very brief. I don't think it is in my best interest to express any opposition to the motion before you for consideration, but I would appreciate the time to just color the motion that is before you in that. Right now, there is a brand new system that's been implemented by the Secretary of State's office for lobbyists, for candidates, and for political action committees. That new program has been met with considerable difficulty from the public to utilize, as well as to deliver the information that I think the agency was hoping it would provide and aggregate for their use, not only for making sure people are in
Can
compliance.
everybody else hear? I can't hear.
We can hear.
Keep going, ma'am.
All right, thank you. And so I would just wanted to bring it to the commission's information that if a bill like this was to pass, I do think it's important to attach some sort of appropriation either for another employee at the Secretary of State's office or for another computer programming to be paid for. It's difficult for us who are in this space to comply with what's expected of us when the actual system isn't working and there's not actual employees that are able to do that work. Also, I would put that there are many members who are lobbyists and who participate in this space who want to work to find a resolution when there is adverse ideas on a bill. And if you're asking people to identify their opposition ahead of getting to that place where they might be able to work together to find a resolution, I think you might cut off some of that goodwill and work that would be put into that process. And so I just wanted to bring those ideas before the commission, as I do practice in this space and I represent other lobbyists that practice in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chavez. Okay, back to commissioners. Anybody else, any of the commissioners, anybody else have a comment or question?
I'd like to just ask a question.
Sure.
Does this include this issue of dark money being paid by lobbyists or something? I've been given that term. I've heard that term, but I don't know what it means. But I know it has something to do, or does it have something to do with lobbyists?
Jeremy?
So, Chair and Commissioner Williams, the dark money issue really isn't related to this bill, which is a bill that would require lobbyists to disclose which bills they're lobbying on or lobbyist employers to make that disclosure and what their position is. Dark money is more akin to the situation with the commission's lawsuit against the Council for Competitive New Mexico, for example, where there are groups that are funding campaign advertisements, either in elections related to candidates or ballot measures, and these groups don't disclose the donors who are actually providing the funding for these campaign advertisements. That's more kind of what the term dark money references, and this bill really isn't related to that problem.
Thank you.
Stuart, is the issue of Jeremy's appearance before the committee, are we discussing that too, or you want to separate that? Stuart?
Stuart I'm afraid is rejoining us here. He's connecting to audio now. He's back. Let me try and ask him to unmute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Got a bad connection down here.
Hey, Stuart, are we discussing I mean, there are really two issues. One of them has to do with Jeremy's appearance, and I want to address that. Are we there?
Yes, I don't know.
I can't hear. I can't hear what he's saying.
I wasn't able to hear other than the beginning of Ms. Chavez's comments. So I don't know where.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead with it then. Whatever our take on the bill is, my concern is having our executive director appear as an expert witness on a bill that is not the commission's bill. I think it's a bad precedent to set, and I think some may take it as a green light to pull us in whenever they want to shore up something that might be need shoring up on a bill that doesn't directly affect us. I don't think that the commission taking a position on endorsing or not endorsing the bill is one thing, but to put the executive director in the position of having to become an expert witness, I think does harm to us in the long run and to his credibility, or could. depending on what happens at the committee. And so whatever the commission's take on the merits of endorsing or not endorsing the bill are one thing, but I am very concerned about having one of our staff used in a way that may not be best for the long-term interests of either him or the commission.
Mr. Chairman, I tend to agree with you, and I think if we want changes in statutes, we ought to request them through the process that we use today to request those changes. My fear is that that will become the go-to place on a lot of bills that people are going to come to the Ethics Commission to support. And I would rather just make our request to the legislature to change the statutes that we believe appropriately need to be changed and support those bills and not participate in support of, if we want this change to happen, we ought to put it in our work plan and ask for it in this session or in the next session. But I don't think we should respond to legislation that is sponsored by legislators. I think it's going to be a tough track for us to go down.
Anyone else?
Yes, my concern is that if someone has knowledge as an expert witness and can add to whatever the discussion is as an expert witness, then I think all the information that person has should be allowed to testify. I hadn't thought of the other considerations, but I do know that it's very helpful when you have someone who's an expert witness and they contribute to the discussion, which could influence the vote.
So the difference, Commissioner, is I agree with you. If you have expertise, it's fine to offer it if asked. But the request here is to support a bill, and that's a different issue altogether. Asking for technical information, legal information, if it's something this person is a specialist in, is okay. But to ask for our commission to support bills that we didn't ask for is a bridge too far.
Anyone else?
Well, I view this as asking for support of a bill that we already endorsed. And so I don't think it is going a bridge too far. I think it's consistent with what we adopted at our last meeting to require some disclosure of what the lobbyists are working on. And by doing it through the rulemaking of a Secretary of State, I think it's even a better proposal than the two specific reports we mentioned. I should add one point that came up in the discussion in terms of the burdens on the lobbyists to report. He does include in this bill a provision that there should not be any burden to report other than one time on a bill. So whenever they make the disclosure of a bill, they shouldn't have to keep reporting it. And that's in the bill as it was introduced. So I just think if we're going to support a concept that we ought to stand behind it. And I think that this is a good concept for us as the Ethics Commission to stand behind, to provide for disclosure to the public of what lobbyists are working on. And so it may have to be done, as I think the governor is correctly pointing out, and also our chairman, on a case-by-case basis. But I think in this particular case, it is a good idea for us as a commission to both endorse the legislation to require disclosure of lobbyists on the bills in which they're working, and to allow Jeremy to testify in favor of that as adopted by the commission.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, let me just say I'm a little concerned about what Ms. Chavez said in terms of the mechanics for doing the reporting, that it's broken or non-existent, and that the people who could help lobbyists navigate the system are not in place. Yeah, everybody wants to support apple pie. but we want to be, I think, supporting things, be able to go into practice. I don't know enough about the bill, quite frankly. The concept obviously sounds really nice on the surface. I'm just wondering if, and I don't want the commission to be portrayed as opposing lobbyist disclosure. I wonder if the appropriate parliamentary procedure is to simply table the motion until we have more information. And the reality is that the next time the commission has a meeting, the legislature will probably have concluded its work. But I'm just concerned about what Ms. Chavez said in terms of the practicalities.
Anyone else?
I think, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, I think Ms. Chavez, she's pointing out to the need for an appropriation to really accommodate the submission of reports to the Secretary of State's office, and that there is not an appropriate amount to cover the cost of another employee at the Secretary of State's office. Just to clarify that. And then another, I guess, question for us is, to what extent do we have permission to participate in support of legislation like this? Because I want to make sure that, one, I understand that we all understand any permissions that we have to participate in the legislative process like this, because as Stuart indicated, it does seem like, based on what our discussions were like, that the next step would be to support something of this nature. But maybe it's that support process that we need to clarify. Do we climb on board to support a bill like this, or essentially propose something similar? So maybe Jeremy or Walker, you could reacquaint us with any permissions that we have to participate in this kind of process. Thank you.
Sure, Chair and Commissioner Solomon, just to respond to that, I believe that the commission has the full authority to instruct me to appear and testify on behalf of a bill, to appear in the comment section, to support or oppose. I mean, the commission, I believe, has the authority to participate in the legislative process as any other member of the public or administrative agency. I'll remind the commission also that the commission executed a resolution at the last meeting that enables the staff to conduct the basic work necessary to include the commission's viewpoint on bills where the commission is asked to provide input, such as requests for analyses from the LFC on bills. That's something that we're essentially doing on a daily basis now. I appear to provide technical commentary on changes, for example, to the procurement code. And so just the commission does and has the full permission, in your words, to participate in the legislative process as any other administrative agency in the state.
Anyone else?
Let me follow up. I don't want to belabor this, but my sense, and Jeremy, tell me if I'm wrong, my sense is that you would like to testify. You think it would be important if you testify. And if I'm correct, would you tell us why?
So Chair and Commissioner Baker, that's not true. At this point, I'm happy to do whatever the commission directs. If it's the commission's preference that I appear and testify as an expert witness on behalf of a bill, in the normal legislative session, the person that's sitting next to the legislator when the bill's presented and is essentially an advocate for the bill and is explaining and kind of defending the bill in an advocacy setting. If the commission were to instruct me to do that, I do it. If the commission thought that that's not in the best interest of the commission now and going forward, I wouldn't. But to your question, I'm totally neutral.
Well, I think I go back to my original comment to Commissioner Williams. As a technical person with information, you should be willing and able to testify before the legislature on your thoughts about any particular bill. My point is, should we be an advocate for that bill? Should you be the person that sits next to the legislator to advocate for the bill? And I'm not sure I'm there yet to believe that that's the case, unless we as a commission specifically ask for that bill.
Okay, anyone else? All right, so Stuart, this is your motion to craft and seek a second on. If you will please attempt to do so.
I make the motion again that we support, as we did at our last meeting, this concept of lobbyists disclosing the bills on which they are working. And that let's do it as a two-part motion. The first part is that we move to support Senate Bill 314 as introduced to require lobbyist disclosure of the bills on which they're working.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Commissioner Baker?
I've got a question. What's the second motion?
The second motion would be to allow Jeremy to testify in favor of the bill as requested by the sponsor.
So if the first question fails, we don't need the second question. Correct?
That's correct.
All right.
I have a question before the voting starts as well.
Correct.
Did we in fact encourage and or support Senator Steinborn in the development of this bill as a result of our resolution of the past meeting?
I did not.
Jeremy, do you have, to my knowledge, we have not been involved in its creation. Is that right, Jeremy?
Chair and Commissioner Carruthers, I saw earlier drafts of the language and provided commentary on them, as did Commissioner Bluestone, but that was short of support. That was more along the lines of providing commentary, as Senator Steinborn's drafts related to what was in the commission's annual report in terms of the commission's recommendations.
Well, I think in fact, if we participated in the development of the bill, and apparently you have, and you were using a resolution from our past meeting, I suppose, to believe that's perfectly okay to do that. I think if we have requests of the legislature to change the bills, we ought to participate with legislators to do it. And I still have this fear that you're going to be called to testify on more bills than you've ever wanted to testify on if you're not careful. You're going to be the person they look to give it a stamp of approval from the commission. So I think we're probably at that point where this is our first opportunity to make a judgment on this. And then we ought to discuss going forward, what is an appropriate way for us to approach the legislature? What is the appropriate way for us to make a judgment as to whether we will testify for or against a bill? You may be asked someday to testify against a bill as well. And are we going to do that? So just some thoughts of how sausage is made. Once you get into the factory, you're part of the factory, and you got to deal with how the sausage is made.
Thanks. And back on the question that was called, Commissioner Baker?
Well, at the risk of voting against mom and apple pie, I'm going to vote no.
Commissioner Bluestone?
Yes.
Commissioner Carruthers?
I'm going to support Stuart on this. I'm going to vote yes, even though I think you understand my apprehensions.
Commissioner Solomon?
I'm going to vote no, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Villanueva?
I'd like to abstain.
And Commissioner Williams?
I vote yes.
Okay. Chair votes no. So it's 3-3. The motion dies for lack of a majority, which I think does us away with the second question, does it not? As somebody alluded to earlier.
Yes, it does.
Okay. That moves us to, is there anything, I mean, that question I think is decided. Missing something.
That's correct, Chair. It failed for lack of a quorum.
Right.
Right.
All right. 13 is commission staff performance evaluations. I know that at least.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, excuse me for interrupting.
Yes.
There were actually 2 items we were
Right.
just discussing.
And I'm
The
sorry,
first one.
I thought we were done
I
on
think
that.
the second one will meet. No, there were 2 items about lobbyist legislation.
I apologize, Stuart.
We
Go ahead.
discussed the issue. That's okay. I mean, I think it's going to come out the same way, but just in fairness, Senator Steinborn had asked us as a commission to endorse another bill he has introduced that we had not taken a position on before. And that is his bill to require lobbyists to disclose the compensation they are paid for lobbying bills. So that's a separate item from disclosing the bills on which the lobbyists are working. I mean, I think I can see the handwriting on the wall, but in fairness, that is the second item of lobbyist legislation that we were asked to address by the senator. And is it all right if I discuss that one briefly?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm sorry, Stuart, I just was procedurally missing that. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. I actually started out against this idea of requiring lobbyists to have to disclose how much they were paid by their employers to lobby legislation. But I've since looked at the research that Walker and others have done. I've looked at surveys that the Council on Governmental Ethics Laws have put together and the National Conference of State Legislatures. And I was approached about this particular bill by Senator Steinborn to ask that the commission would endorse this concept as well. And I have since kind of changed my mind that while I think there's an interest in the confidentiality of private contractual relationships, I think that as 23 other states have indicated, there's also a strong public interest in knowing how much money private interests are putting in to affect public policy. And I think whether it's done with a range of compensation amounts or a specific amount paid, I think I've changed my mind, and I believe that it is appropriate for us as an ethics commission to endorse the idea that lobbyists and/or lobbyist employers should be required to disclose the amount of money they pay in compensation to influence the lobbying process and to get bills either passed or defeated in the legislative process. So with 23 other states having this kind of a law in effect, I would move that our commission endorse Senate Bill 311, which would require disclosure of the compensation lobbyist employers pay to lobbyists. It's a separate issue from the disclosure of the bills on which the lobbyists are working, but I think it's worth our consideration when we've been asked to endorse the matter, and I'm simply bringing that forward. I personally am in favor of it after I've researched it and thought about it more. But that's the second issue, Mr. Chairman and other commissioners, is do we want to support as a commission Senate Bill 311?
Thank you. So the motion is for the commission to endorse / support Senate Bill 311. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Baker?
Well, once again, at the risk of voting against mom and apple pie, I like the concept of disclosure. I'm not sure I want to have the commission endorse a specific piece of legislation. So once again, if there's a way to table it, I would prefer that we table this and consider it later, because this is an issue that's not going to go away. And, but if forced to vote at the moment, yeah, I'm going to vote no.
Thank you. Commissioner Bluestone, I assume you're a yes.
You assume correctly, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Carruthers?
No.
Commissioner Solomon?
No.
Commissioner Villanueva?
No.
Commissioner Williams?
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
If a lobbyist, for example, has let's say you had indicated if someone has 100 people or organizations, do they have to disclose what they get from each organization? Or do they have to disclose just totally what they get from all the organizations?
The bill as introduced would require the lobbyists to disclose how much they are paid. And it could be done either by the lobbyists' employers or by the lobbyists or both as a check, but it would require disclosure. So for example, if a payday lending company is paying 10 lobbyists for a total of $500,000 to defeat a certain bill, that would come out in this disclosure.
Well, I personally would like to know what lobbyists get paid. I don't know why we would be against that, but I think it's important for people to understand or to know. Lobbyists don't get a lot of attention paid by the general public. So I would like to know what those lobbyists get paid, and I vote yes.
Thank you. Chair votes no. The motion dies. The motion is defeated. Is there anything else on item number 12?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I really think we ought to reflect in the future about how we're going to manage these situations,
I
because
agree.
we're kind of new and young, and I think there are going to be more demands to support or contribute. I think we ought to understand that we should always be able to ask for legislation to, as we've had this year, to correct some of the issues we had with the earlier legislation, setting up the commission. I'd be a little more comfortable if we sort of had some rules of the road, and then we could respond to people who ask for support or ask for technical help. And we don't always have to go through this every time that we have a bill, because frankly, if the commission is successful, there's going to be more and more demands for this kind of activity.
Yeah, and to that end, what I would suggest maybe, Governor, is not today, but after this meeting, I will reach out, and if it's okay with the consensus of the commissioners, to ask a couple of folks to work as a subcommittee, if you will, on outlining something that we might take a look at over the course of the next few months. We'll have a while to look at this and come up with a plan that has some flexibility, obviously, but is designed to do just as you suggest.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, along the same lines, I think that distinction between our executive director appearing as an expert witness or in support of, I think the distinction there is really, that's really what has caused me to pause on this. And I think you're going down the right path, to really have some individuals really take a closer look at this, and not to really I think Stewart's idea, and I think Governor Carruthers also, just basically reflected on this, that, there are certain aspects of what the legislation that's being proposed in both bills, which is meaningful to us and something that we've talked about, but having to get into the fray of the political environment of supporting and then providing what would be, I think, seen as supporting testimony by our executive director, that I think that really gets us tangled up in something that we don't want to get involved in. And I just want to reinforce, I think Stewart is on the right track, but maybe we can take a look at this and come up with something that's maybe more to our liking and that reflects a manner or process in which we want to proceed in matters of this nature, particularly when we've adopted resolutions that really seem to support one approach. So that's all I want to say on that.
Thank you.
I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Okay, anything else on item number 12? All right, if not, we'll move to item number 13. And Commissioner Williams, you again are bringing up the Commission of Staff performance evaluations. I believe we have dealt with this on at least 2 prior occasions, but maybe I'm forgetting that or I'm missing something. So would you please tell us what it is you're looking for?
Yes. First of all, I want to take this time to tell staff and Jeremy what an outstanding job they're doing. No question about it. I'm always amazed when I get all of this paper that I have to read and what they do, and with the time frame that they have, they're all doing, as far as I'm concerned, an outstanding job. But I do have some concerns, and there's some things that I don't understand. I know we have not seen a job description for the executive director. As I pointed out, and I have to apologize that I maybe should not send it the way it did, but it's because I think, and I feel strongly that he should be evaluated. We have one employee, that's the executive director. And there comes a time when I feel very strongly that I'd like to have a job description, which, as I pointed out, is in the statute as far as what his duties are. But I think we also have to have a way of evaluating him, setting some performance standards is the usual way to do it. And I think it's time. He's had, he's been with us over a year. I feel the same way about the rest of the organization. And frankly, I don't know much about how what these job descriptions are. I don't know how much they're getting paid. And as I asked, I'd like to start off with having an organizational chart provided to us. I'd like to see what the jobs are. I'd like to see what the salaries are for the jobs, because I have no knowledge, and I think I should have knowledge, and I think the commissioner should have knowledge. And having said that, the next thing is there should be, I'd like to see job descriptions for the employees we have. And I'd like to see if there are performance standards and how they're being evaluated. If they're being evaluated, does the state require an evaluation? I am not familiar with HR procedures with the state, but I'd certainly like to become familiar. And if I can speak to someone in HR, or if Jeremy can tell me, I feel very strongly that I personally don't feel that I know enough about the organization as far as the job descriptions are concerned. I see finance director. I don't know what that means. I know that Jeremy has asked for, with regard to Wendy. I'm not sure why. I don't know what has happened with her job, that there would have to be an increase. And I also think that when there is a requirement, and I know there'll be requirements for additional personnel with what we are facing, especially in the near future, that you'll have to have more employees. You can't go on and do what you're doing. And the expansion of requests, I feel very strongly that there will be a need for additional employees. But I would like to have the executive director come before the commission and ask permission to fill a position and recommend the reasons why. I think that's part of our job. It also impacts on the budget because we'll probably need an increase in the budget. So with that, I just feel, and I also want to make another statement. Judge Lang, I have appeared in court a lot about personnel issues. And one of the things, if you're trying to terminate an employee, et cetera, is that if you have to praise them and you're going to fire them for whatever reasons, you lose. I think there should be a requirement, and I'm sure there is in the state personnel procedures about having performance evaluations. I just don't know what they are, but I'd like to know. And also, I would like to see exactly the job descriptions as they are written and as they are filled, and to see if those positions match what the people in the organization are doing, because they should. And even though this is an at-will state, that means nothing. I've been involved in many cases where we've had county commissioners, other people, auditors and so forth, at-will employees that are terminated. And if they go to federal district court, forget that, because that overrules at-will. And as an example, we've had our county commissioner who was not appraised. She got terminated. She went to federal district court. She got $525,000. The same thing with our sheriff, who is an auditor, where she got $1.25 million. So what I'm asking for exactly is what I put in my request. I would like to see an organizational chart. I'd like to see the nomenclatures for each of the jobs. I'd like to see the sector of what they're making. And then I would like to also know if there are performance standards that have been established, and if any of those employees, at least who have been there for a year, have been evaluated. And if they haven't been evaluated, what does the state say about that? Shouldn't employees be evaluated every year at least? So that, what I put in my memorandum to all of you is my concerns. And I would like to have your comments or questions. That's it.
Thank you. I know that we have dealt with this on at least 2 other occasions, but for the 3rd time, the executive director and general counsel jobs, they are at will, as you suggest. It's laid out by a statute. If we start doing things that define their job more narrowly, we expose ourselves to a wider variety of possible lawsuits than a narrower one. I, for one, am not willing to go down that road and change what is already there. And I suspect the other commissioners feel the same way. To the extent you're requesting other information, I don't think there's any reason on the personnel. I mean, we've voted on approving everybody that we've hired, or allowing the executive director to make the hires and the general counsel to make the hires, as well as the budget, which contains everybody's salaries. But to the extent that we can do a document that concisely details all of that, I'm assuming, Jeremy, that you have no quarrel about doing that and laying out job duties.
Chair and Commissioner Williams, that's correct. The to echo the job descriptions of the ED and the general counsel are pretty well laid out in the statute. As for organizational chart, the commission received the organizational chart as on page 6 of the strategic plan, which was provided to the commissioners and is up on the website. Every week or biweekly, the commission receives an updated budget that includes personnel salary information. With respect to the commission's role in administering the agency and the executive director's role, the statute makes clear that it's the executive director that hires additional staff. The commission really doesn't have a role in that. With respect to job descriptions and performance evaluations, that really depends on whether or not the staff is a GovX position or a personnel service position. Personnel service positions, the job descriptions are laid out in the PARFs that are approved by SPO. They're in a personnel service employee's initial year with the commission. They're in probationary status, which means that there are 4 evaluations that occur between the supervisor and the personnel service employee. Those are all provided to SPO at the end of the evaluation period. With respect to GovX positions, it's a similar consideration that Judge Lang spoke about with respect to at-will employment. GovX positions are at will. That being said, there is job roles, duties, performance metrics for GovX positions, and Walker and I do conduct job evaluations of the GovX employees at the commission. And Judge and Commissioner Williams, that's not as much, that is as much for kind of traditional HR reasons as it is for just institutionalizing these roles in this new agency. The future staff members that occupy these positions will need to be able to look back and see what the initial staff members did and how work was divided. And Chair and Commissioner Williams, I have provided job descriptions to you in emails in the past, and I'm happy to do so again. And Chair, to your point, I'm happy to provide these documents upon request, and we'll do so again after the meeting.
Okay, may it please the court? I want to dispel this thing about it at will. If tomorrow, let's say something happened with Jeremy and we weren't pleased and we were going to terminate him, that at will doesn't hold water if he decides to go to federal court and he files a court case on unlawful termination or discrimination based on whatever. So I've had that experience. And as I mentioned, we've had 2 big cases in Doñana County, which have cost us millions of dollars. So at will doesn't apply. It doesn't apply if they decide to go to federal district court. I don't remember getting job descriptions, but I would certainly like to see them. And if I can see, I'd like to see the salaries. Now, you had indicated that you wanted to upgrade Wendy's position. That's fine. I don't know if you've done it or not. My concern is that when I get my reports, it's kind of a done deal that they have been hired. And we have not been asked, and you have not gone before us to my recollection and asked, I want to hire this attorney. Do I have your permission to do so? It's just been a done deal. And that's according to my recollection. And I'm just saying that I feel that anything that's any person that's going to be hired, and perhaps I need to be more acquainted with the HR rules of the state. And I'd like to have that tell me where I can go to get that information, because I want to be more knowledgeable before I make any comments. So I appreciate it. And if you'll give me what I have asked for, that's fine.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I would like to know if Jeremy's had a performance evaluation, and it would probably be by the chair of the commission. Has that happened? And if it hasn't happened,
it has not.
Probably ought to happen on an annual basis. Then Jeremy ought to evaluate everybody else in the organization. Annual performance evaluations are good ideas.
Anyone else?
I
Okay.
agree with Governor Carruthers on that.
Anyone
Well,
else?
I just wanted to ask, I didn't see the job, I saw yours are in a statute. So as far as developing performance standards, and in order us to evaluate you, we have to have some standards of performance that have been developed to measure you against, the same way with the general counsel. And I don't remember seeing anything about the general counsel's duties, but I certainly would like to see that. And I would be very happy to work with anyone or the chair or whatever on, and you especially, because you should have something to say about the standards about which against you are going to be evaluated against. But we definitely should have an appraisal by this time of you and any staff member that's been with you, I think, for a year.
Anyone else? Okay, and Jeremy, will you please furnish Commissioner Williams and anyone else who wants it with the information, irrespective of whether it's been previously sent?
Happy to do so. It'll be in the next weekly update.
Thank you. That's a good way of doing it. Okay, let's move on to public comment.
Chair, I've sent messages to folks in the chat room to please send me a message if you would like to make a public comment. Anyone who's joining by phone can press *9 to raise their hand and I will unmute you. I've received 2 requests to make public comments so far, and I will note any further requests that come in during these 2 comments, but I'm going to go ahead and unmute and ask to come on camera, Mr. Tony Ortiz. And go ahead, sir. Please introduce yourself and your affiliation, and then please address the commission.
Thanks, Walker, and thanks, commissioners. Tony Ortiz, and I work with New Mexico Ethics Watch. Couple of things I'd like to share with the commission. New Mexico Ethics Watch, just in the past week, issued a new report regarding the continuing influence of the oil and gas industry in New Mexico. And as it so happens, at the end of our report, there are some recommendations regarding proposed amendments to the Lobbyist Regulation Act. Full disclosure, it's a very lengthy report, but there is a 2-page highlight section, which I believe all the commissioners received. 2 of those recommendations for proposed amendments you discussed today when you were discussing Senator Steinborn's bill. One other measure that's in there aligns with some comments that Commissioner Baker made this morning about the importance of public disclosure on tough issues. And that particular proposal goes to instances when legislators have a family relationship with a lobbyist, and that lobbyist is working on a bill that the legislator will have to vote upon. And our proposal is that there be a public disclosure regarding that relationship. So that's a couple of things. And then the final thing I'd like to share with you, and I think Commissioner Bluestone will recognize what I'm talking about here. During the many years when Stuart and I worked at the Legislative Counsel Service, there were instances when we were asked to serve as expert witnesses alongside legislators when they presented their bills. And at the Counsel Service, there was a statement that we shared with the committee prior to speaking, just basically along the lines that we were not there to support or oppose the bill, but solely to provide technical information. And that may be useful to you as you move forward in your discussions about the role of the executive director and to keep Jeremy out of any entanglements at the Capitol. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak and hope you all have the opportunity to look at the highlights from our latest report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz.
All right. The only other person I've seen a request from is Miss Ricky Lee Chavez. She's asked to address the commission again in this general public comment section. So I'm asking her to unmute herself and start her video.
Thank you, Walker, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Thank you again for your time and an opportunity to speak to you. Mr. Ortiz, I did read your report and I think it's fantastic. So New Mexico Ethics Watch does fantastic work. On that note, I just wanted to flag for the commission that my participation here today was to just flag for you all that all of us that are under the Lobbyist Regulation Act or the Campaign Reporting Act do at some point or another fall under your jurisdiction for non-compliance. And in that vein, something to look at whenever we're addressing issues of changing anything with regard to the election code, campaign reporting, or lobbyist regulations is that the Secretary of State does oversee all of those changes. And in that regard, it has been my experience that while we are really fortunate to have a fantastic public body and agency with amazing staff, that they are stressed to the limit and they need to either be funded to have additional employees or they need to be more adequately funded to improve their technology systems. None of my comments are meant to disparage the agency or to advocate for or against more disclosure for one group or another. I think that all of us in this space want to be more transparent, because if you're in this space, you're on the non-popular side of an issue at least once or twice. So I just wanted to kind of buttress my comments that I made earlier in that any information I'm bringing for you today is because I do participate in this space. I represent people who participate in this space, and we all want to be in compliance, but we need the agency that's overseeing us to be properly funded, to have more employees, and to have better technology. Thank you.
Ms. Chavez, would you mind saying whether you're appearing on behalf of any clients today at the commission meeting?
I'm not appearing on behalf of any clients. My business is Capital Counsel and Consulting, and we do lobbyist and campaign and candidate compliance work.
Thank you. All right, I'm muting you and disabling your video. Oh, she did it herself. Thank you, Ricky Lee. The next comment, public comment we have is from Dr. Bobby Green. I've asked you to unmute yourself, and I think your video is enabled. So go ahead and address the commission, Dr. Green.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyd. Chairman Lang and the members of the commission, I would like to thank you on behalf of the Martin Luther King Commission. I am the secretary of the commission and one of the longest seated members of that board. It took us a lot of courage to ask for an ethics opinion, and many of my constituents were reluctant to do so. But nonetheless, we are grateful for your recommendations. You have given us some useful suggestions, and we're very grateful for that. Your analysis also stated that in a well-functioning democratic government, public disclosure is pressure, and that was in response to the statement made by the Auditor Cologne, who wants to bring forth public pressure on the commission. But shouldn't that public disclosure include the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So I do have a question. I note that you have made recommendations about what we should do in the future with regard to the short staffing and the limited funding and the issues that we have. But there was nothing really to address the nasty public comments that have been made to the press that have introduced for the commission a public relations nightmare that have detracted from our mission and our purpose, and that are misleading and have resulted in manipulating the public and wreaked havoc on our reputation as the Martin Luther King Commission. So my question is there to be no accountability from elected officials who go to the press and make misleading statements against a state agency?
Thank you, Dr. Green.
Thank you.
Any other public comment, Walker or Jeremy?
I do not see any comments. Sunny, did you receive any other messages from members of the audience? Okay, Chair Lang, I know in the past we've cycled through participants, but the number of participants today and how close we are to the end of the meeting, I would just suggest that, you know, we take a moment to see if anyone else wants to raise their hand or send a message, but then we just go to the next item.
That's fair. Okay, if there is someone who wishes to share their public comment, we'll wait a few more moments here. Sunny, I'll look to you to see if we have anybody.
Chair Lang, I don't see anyone at the moment.
Quiet.
Chairman Lang?
See.
Yes, Commissioner Williams.
Yes, I believe that Ms. Green Dr. Green asked a question of us with regard to if legislators.
Well, I believe there was. This is a public comment section. I mean, there is I took it as rhetorical, but Walker or Jeremy, Walker, I believe, Jeremy, did you author that or did Walker? Who authored that?
Chair Lang and Commissioners, I was the primary author of that advisory opinion.
I'm not sure that the question isn't answered, but if I misread that, Jeremy?
No, I believe the advisory opinion speaks to the facts presented in the request as to the state auditor's conduct and concluded that under those facts, there's no Governmental Conduct Act violation.
Right. That's what I assume. Is there anyone else wishing to make public comment?
Not that I can see.
Okay, then we'll move on to item number 15, which is determination of the next meeting, which by my calendar looks to be April 2nd, which is the first Friday in April. Correct? All right. I believe that's everything on the agenda. Correct me if I'm missing something, anybody? If not, I don't know if I need to take a motion, but I do it all the time. So there's a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Thank you, Commissioner Baker,
yes.
Bluestone,
Yes.
Commissioner Carruthers,
Yes.
Commissioner Solomon. Commissioner Solomon,
Yes.
thank you. Commissioner Villanueva
Yes.
and Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Thank you. Chair votes yes. We are adjourned. Thanks very much. See you all soon. I will be in touch regarding the that subcommittee we talked about. Thank you. Everybody be safe and well.
Bye.
Thank you, members of
Thank
the
you.
public,
Bye-bye.
for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.